Hello fellow amp gardeners. So the last video I filmed was all of the tools and the terminology that you would need to actually do mead making. And today I've got honey, I've got water, I've got my carboys, and we're going to go ahead and do the step-by-step of making the mead. Before we start the whole process of making the mead, we have to make sure that our jar that we're going to put it in is clean and sanitized. Easiest way to do that is kill two birds with one stone. You take the funnel and the sanitizer solution and pour it in. Which has the effect of sanitizing the inside of your funnel. I'm not putting this on very tight, just enough to keep it from splashing, and that right there is enough to clean out anything that's going on in here. And then you just put it back. Now what I'm going to wind up doing is leaving this set with a cap on it for about 10 to 15 minutes or so to let everything be sitting upside down so it will all drain out. And then once it's all drained to the cap, I'll get the last of the water out so that it can be safe to use. So to speed up the process of getting honey into the jar, and has the side benefits of being able to sanitize some of your other stuff, I've already got this sanitizer in here nice and warm. Probably only about 100 degrees or so. Don't let it get above that. 114 will kill off your yeast, and that's just no good for anybody. Now, while this is sitting here and it's warming up, you can go ahead and add in your airlock, which is now sanitized. And you can add in the bung, which is now sanitized. And then you just have to wait a couple minutes to get the honey up to temperature. The spoon that you're going to use to stir it, I generally will wait until I've got the honey up to temperature. I'll sit it to the side. I'll pour the warm sanitizer stuff back into the sanitizer jar, and then just sit this in here so I can get it fully cleaned out. Alright, so it's been about 10 minutes or so. The honey's nice and warm. I've already had the seal, the tamper seal, pulled off of these, and now with the sanitizer solution on this, I will go ahead and put in the food, then the honey, and then I've got to get the water warm in the cooker, and then we'll add that in, and then we'll stir it up, and we should be well on our way to making some mead. This next part is pretty easy. I'm going to go ahead and take the Fermax, and I like to add it before I've added any honey or water. I'm going to go ahead and put it into the container, and that way it's going to get stirred up at the same time that the honey gets stirred up. So as you can see, I just now added it in. Next we're going to go ahead and apply the honey. I'm doing clover honey this time because it was the only thing left on the shelves. Unfortunately, this is regular clover honey. This isn't the raw and unfiltered, which is what I prefer because it tastes better. It has more of the nutrients in it that you want from honey, but it's what I could get. So the next part of this video is super boring. It involves me opening up the top of this honey, and if you notice, it's very liquid. And since the only type that they had a little pour spout on it, I'll be able to not use the funnel this time and still make it all in the bottle. So giving it a nice little squeeze. I'm going to go ahead and stop this until I get the second bottle into it and pick back up when it's something interesting. So something to note, because they didn't have my normal 3-pound batches of honey, I'm actually using a 2-pound 8-ounce honey and a 1-pound honey, which means that I'm not going to have to be as conservative with pouring warm water into the bottles or into the containers and shaking it to get the last little bits of honey out of it. And as of right now, this is why we heat the honey. Because it makes the process go a lot faster. So this mead is probably going to be a lot richer. Normally what I would do is take the water that I'm putting into the fermenter. I would put it into here first, give it a quick shake, and get all the last little bits of honey out of here. But as of right now, since I'm putting 8 ounces extra, a half-pound extra of honey into it, it doesn't need that. And as you can see, 3.5 pounds of honey is a pretty good amount. Okay, so another thing that I've had to do because of the coronavirus, normally I get the 1 gallons of Geyser Springs, and that's what I use for my water. They didn't even have all of the same brand at the store I was at that I found the honey. So I've got the water just before the boiling point right now, which means I'm going to go ahead and pull it off the heater. It's all nice and foggy, but not boiling. So I already have the food in there, the honey's in there. This has been dipped in sanitizer. Now, what I would like for you to see here in a second is all this honey on the bottom. That needs to be stirred and agitated up. All of this honey has to be stirred up. It stirs in a lot quicker because of the heat of the water. And you can actually see some of the little white bits and chunks. That is that Fermex. That means it's getting stirred up in there as well. Now, when you're stirring, also go across the bottom of the carboy, because the honey will stick in certain places. Now what you're going to want to do is cap it, and you're going to check for falling honey. If you turn it over and there's still honey dripping like this, you haven't got it stirred up enough. Okay? So you go back to stirring. So that looks like it is pretty much done up. Set that over there. All right. Right now the water, actually this is called must now because it's got the food, the water, and the honey in it. So this is no longer anything other than must. It's not that hot because I took it off right as it was getting ready to get to the boiling point. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go all the way up to the 1 gallon marking line. Okay, so I had to put that over in the sink, which means I need to rinse it off. and then dip it back in the sanitizer before I go ahead and continue stirring, because as you can see, it's not fully stirred up. Alright, now we're done with this. Okay, so now this is all stirred up. Normally I make 2-gallon batches, but I only found enough honey for 1 gallon this time. As I said in the other video, these are good for up to 5 gallons. I just used the whole thing. They're going to create their own colony inside here as it is, so might as well give them as many friends to help out when you're first starting anyway. This is no longer must. This is now the beginnings of mead. Once again, gotta rinse off the spoon. Do another quick slosh. And then I'm going to go ahead and stir this part up. Alright, the last thing to do for this is to dry off the lip. Make sure it's dry. The bung, which we have already dipped in the sanitizer, has been sitting there drying. Making sure it's still dry. Now, go ahead and put a little of the sanitizing solution up to the line. Now we're going to go ahead and put this back together. This goes on here. And within the next day or so, the colony will be eating enough that it will start bubbling and start making mead for you. This will go away for the next 15 to 20 days, and then we rack it into the next carboy, the other clean carboy. Now, one last thing that I didn't mention that you need in the other video is a pen, a piece of paper, and a hair tie or whatever fastening device you choose. Information to be recorded would be the type of honey. This was clover. The type of yeast you used, I used a semi-sweet, which is for making wine. The date that you put it in, and if you are at the level of trying to perfect your amount of alcohol, then you would want your gravity reading. If you're not at that level, then don't even worry about that part. I've taken to using index cards, punch a hole, stick a hair tie through, and then this can go right here, so that when the bottle gets shifted, instead of having to untape another bottle and put it back onto there, all the information is right there. I got room to write anything extra that needs to be put on it. If I were to add something in like cherries or strawberries, things to flavor it, I could add all of that information in there. I hope this has been informative. I hope it hasn't bored you too much, but this is mead making. Okay guys, so you stayed until the very, very end. This is something I'm doing now because I'm at this stage. What you are going to do with this cylinder, with this, which is a hydrometer, and a turkey baster, is you're going to check for the specific gravity of your mead. So at this point, we just now got it in here. The yeast is just now getting ready to eat. So I've gotten and obviously sanitized this out. Okay, so all of this has been sanitized out. What you're going to want to do is go just inside. Don't worry about aerating right now. And then you're going to want to put it in here. You need enough so that the hydrometer will float. This is a purely extra step. If you trust the yeast and you have a rough idea of where you're sitting at, now with the hydrometer, you've got a bunch of different readings on here. The 00 is water. Anything above that means that it has sugars in the water. And as you can tell, they normally doesn't sit up this high. As you can tell, there is a lot of sugars in here because we have 3.5 pounds of sugar. So as of right now, I'm sitting at 3.0 or 17% if this yeast eats all of the sugars that are currently available to it. Later on, when you're doing gravity readings, you shouldn't put the sample back in, but as of right now, it's still aerated. This won't hurt it. This was sanitized, that was sanitized, so there is no harm in just dumping this back in, because if you notice, that is a lot of mead to be wasted. And then once again, we just have to wipe off the rim and put the bung back in, and we're good to go. I'm going to go ahead and note that on here so that I have a rough idea of where it started and where it's going to. Thanks for watching, guys.